Ladies and gentlemen, yesterday we got the updated college football playoff rankings. A lot of people were very pissed off at certain teams like Alabama, Ohio State, the seeds, things like that. I'm going to go through and explain everything because I basically nailed this 100% when you look at my predictions. And it is based off of what's going to be happening this week, but just where I thought these teams were going to be ranked, specifically Ohio State being in front of Tennessee, very likely cementing themselves as hosting a playoff game, as well as Alabama being the bubble team to make the playoff, which is another thing that I predicted. Now, when it comes to this, I'm just going to go through each team, and then we're going to look at the bracket. So you do have Oregon. Obviously, Oregon, nobody disagrees. They're the number one team right now in college football. They're the only undefeated team. If they win, they will remain the number one team, and they'll have that first round bye. If you are Oregon, just looking at this, with how wonky these seeds are, you would much rather, I would assume, rather face the winner of Penn State, Arizona State than Ohio State, Tennessee. But that's just the way the seeds are in this. And, although I will say, do you really want to face Penn State back-to-back almost? I don't know about that. And that's something that the committee is also going to have to try and shy away from. I mean, here you have Georgia possibly facing Texas for a third time. So, and for Texas, if they beat Georgia, they're going to have a bye. Then they're going to face Georgia again. These are things that are going to have to be talked about. But that's just more nuance. So you do have Oregon. Everyone agrees they're the number one team. Texas, if Texas beats Georgia, they're going to be the number two team unless Oregon loses. Then they'll move to number one. If Texas loses, they will drop to number 5. We would expect. If Oregon also loses, then Texas will drop to number 6 and Oregon will be number 5. Everyone agrees there. Penn State at number 3. It is what it is. There are SEC people that don't think Penn State should be number 3 because of their weak resume. They do only have one loss to Ohio State, but they don't have any crazy good win. You do have Notre Dame at number 4. This is where people, you look at Notre Dame, they've got the terrible loss to Northern Illinois. Notre Dame, their resume is really based off of the fact that they've crushed pretty much everyone the past 2 months or so, although the schedule has not been good. They've not played a good schedule at all. But I think it's very obvious if Georgia loses, they're obviously not going to move past Notre Dame. Ohio State's not going to move past Notre Dame. Tennessee's not going to move past Notre Dame. So Notre Dame, very likely worst case scenario, will be a 7 seed. Worst case scenario. But probably they're going to stay at number 6. They could even move up depending on what happens with Penn State, although that comes down to the argument, do you want to punish a team for playing in a conference championship when Notre Dame's an independent? But the reason that Notre Dame's at number 4 right now is because of how dominant they've been. Their analytics are really good. I wonder what their game control is right now. Notre Dame is number 3 in terms of game control. You can see their strength of schedule is not good, though, 57th, but the FPI is number 2. They have a very good FPI because they've been blowing teams out. So that's really why the analytics are nice for Notre Dame. When you've got a number 2 FPI, you also, if you're taking a look at strength of record, number 5, that's very, very good. So that's why Notre Dame is ranked ahead of, some of these, although are they even ranked ahead of, they're not even ranked ahead of any 2-loss teams. So, I mean, for Notre Dame, all right, Next, you do have Georgia. I don't think there's any real problems with Georgia being number 5. There's going to be arguments if Georgia ends up losing to Texas, though. Does Georgia move down? Do you punish Georgia for playing in the SEC championship? I don't think so, honestly. Even if with Georgia with 3 losses, they'll probably stay in front of Ohio State and Tennessee. Another reason is because Georgia does have a very, very hard schedule, a much harder schedule than Ohio State or Tennessee. And then you get the first big dispute that I saw was Ohio State being ranked ahead of Tennessee, and Ohio State in specific only dropping 4 spots. Ohio State dropped from number 2 to number 6, and people were comparing like SEC schools, other schools that lost to an unranked team dropping significantly earlier in the season. So I'll go ahead and explain why that is. When you're talking about week 2 or week 1, let's just say week 1, for example, and a team is ranked like 7th overall and they face an unranked team and they lose, obviously there's going to be a lot more volatility with the rankings because there's no resume. So the team is 0-1 after they lose in week 1, and you're going to drop from number 9 if you lose to an unranked team, possibly out of the top 25 or at least down 10 or 11 spots. Now you're wondering, well, why didn't Ohio State drop down 9 or 10 spots or 11 spots? Where's the consistency? It's because Ohio State has already built up a resume with 2 top 10 wins. Their analytics are great. And, this is the 12th game of the season. It's not the second game of the season. So the idea that you would compare Tennessee barely, struggling with a bad SEC team and dropping down 4 spots, and then Ohio State actually loses and they only drop down 4 spots. You're comparing an earlier time in the season when there was less resume versus the end of the season. That's why Ohio State only dropped down 4 spots. It was because they've already built up a resume, and there's a lot less volatility when you have a built-in resume. If Ohio State would have lost, week 2 to an unranked team, they would have fallen a lot more than 4 spots. But because they have a resume, that is why they only fell down 4 spots. Because at the end of the season, you're not going to see crazy rankings shifts where teams move up 10, 11 spots, especially if they have a good resume like Ohio State. So that's why Ohio State. And by the way, there's just nothing you can say that would suggest Tennessee should be in front of Ohio State, unless you're just going to say, Indiana and Penn State are way overrated. That's really all you can say. And by the way, you're saying that the committee is overrating Penn State and Indiana because both of those are top 10 wins right now for Ohio State. So in the committee's view, Ohio State has 2 top 10 wins, way better than Tennessee's wins. Ohio State has a better strength of schedule, I think by 2. Even you look at that when they talk about the SEC having a great schedule. Ohio State 26 strength of schedule, Tennessee 28, Ohio State FPI 3, Tennessee 7, Ohio State game control 7, Tennessee 12. Ohio State is just better analytically than Tennessee. They have a comparable loss to Tennessee. When you look at, they have a better loss for sure, losing by 1 point on the road against the number 1 team in the country. Tennessee has the loss against Arkansas, but Ohio State's just overall resume is better in pretty much every aspect. The only argument you can make for Tennessee being better is recency bias based off the fact that Ohio State lost to Michigan. But even that, it's like, so you're going to penalize Ohio State for losing a game at the end of the season rather than if they would have lost in week 7. It's arbitrary. It doesn't make sense. So that's why Ohio State's in front of Tennessee. And listen, that could be the 8v9 game. We don't know exactly, but it does look like Ohio State will be hosting a playoff game. Yes, Ohio State's probably going to move down a little bit. So is Tennessee, because they're going to have to give the auto bids to the ACC champion who's going to move up, and then also to Boise State if Boise State wins. So they'll move down. That's why Ohio State right now is number 6, but they're probably going to move down to number 8. Tennessee is number 7. They're probably going to move down to number 9. There are potential other ways to where Ohio State possibly could be number 7, although I think you're probably looking at an 8v9 matchup there, which is what I said on Sunday night. I predicted that. So that's why Ohio State is in front of Tennessee. You have SMU right now at number 8. So here it comes, right? SMU at number 8. If they lose, what happens? Because it's going to be between them and probably Alabama. And that brings us to the Alabama argument. Why is Alabama in right now instead of Miami? Miami only has 2 losses. Alabama has 3 losses. Alabama has the terrible loss to Oklahoma. And the reason is, and guys, I'm sure a lot of you remember this, and there were a lot of people that didn't like Miami when this was happening. Miami won 2 games in the middle of the season because of the referees. Legit because of the referees. Remember that game against Cal with the targeting that wasn't called? And then the other game that was the Friday night game, Thursday night game against Virginia Tech with the end zone Hail Mary. I mean, this Miami team very easily could have 4 losses. I think you look at Alabama, you look at Miami, the holy grail is strength of record. That is the ultimate metric that normally decides these things. Alabama's at number 10, Miami's at number 14. You look at FPI, Miami's at 4, Alabama's at 4, Miami's at 11. Now, people would say the FPI is a fraud thing because the FPI is an analytical ranking that takes into account overall roster talent. So that's why when you look at FPI and you see the amount of SEC teams inside the top 25, it's because the SEC recruits better than every conference. So they're going to have a built-in advantage with something like the FPI system. Now, that doesn't mean that the FPI can't move up a team that's, not crazy talented. I mean, look at what they've done to Indiana. A lot of the FPI is based off of dominance. That's why Indiana's already at number 10 when they started all the way down wherever they were, because they've been dominating teams, and you move up, you get rewarded for that. But I can understand why people don't like the FPI when you're comparing teams, but that's a pretty big difference when you look at Alabama being at number 4, Miami being at number 11. You look at a strength of schedule, Alabama's at 17, Miami's at 55. That's not even close. And then you look at the game control, Alabama's at 11, Miami's at 21. So Bama's got significantly better metrics. Yes, Bama has 3 losses. I get it. People saying, well, South Carolina should be in. Again, you're talking about an arbitrary, well, they've been playing better lately. Well, Alabama beat them head-to-head. It was only a 2-point win. But South Carolina also, They've got that horrible loss to Ole Miss. I mean, you lose to Ole Miss 27-3 at home. I mean, you're not a playoff team. It's just that's I know that you could argue 3 losses. Alabama has 3 losses too, but I just don't see it with South Carolina. But South Carolina would be the team that you would be arguing with between them and Alabama. And if we do get a 14-team playoff, then yes, South Carolina very likely would be in the 14-team playoff. And I think they need to get rid of the auto bids as well. But Alabama, really the argument right now, and you could also argue maybe even BYU. You look at BYU, I would say they're at number 12 in terms of strength of record. They're sitting there at 10-2. Miami's also at 10-2. You look at the stuff, you look at the strength of schedule, BYU's at 44, Miami's at 55. The game control, BYU is better as well than Miami. Oh, I was looking at the wrong thing. Never mind. Bama's 5th in game control, by the way. Miami's 19th. So I had the wrong metric there. Bama's resume is just way better. I understand people are pissed off they have 3 losses. I get it, but they've got better wins. Miami, listen, if you don't beat a ranked team, and I know people are talking about, well, Duke should be ranked. I mean, you look at Duke. I understand Duke is 9-3, and maybe you could slide them in at number 24 or 25. But dude, they beat Northwestern by 6 points. They beat UConn by 5 at home. They beat North Carolina by 1 point. They beat Florida State by 7. This is not a good team. They're just not a good team. They beat Wake Forest by 6. I mean, are we really going to sit here and say this Duke team is a powerhouse and that's a deserved win? I mean, come on. But people were arguing that as well. And so that was really the argument there. When it comes to Boise State has no business getting a bye. I mean, it's just the way it's set up, though. They're going to get a bye because of the way it's set up. It is what it is. I mean, Boise State, the best thing on Boise State's resume is the loss because, you play in the Mountain West, but their best thing on their resume is a loss to Oregon. But Boise State, if they win, you would expect they're going to get the 4 seed. SMU is going to get the 3 seed, and then Arizona State. You can see how this sets up here. Arizona State gets slotted in at the 12 seed, or Iowa State, depending on who wins. They're interchangeable there. But I'm looking at this bracket. SMU gets the bye. Notre Dame versus Bama. Yeah, I'm sure they would love that game. Notre Dame versus Bama. Obviously, if SMU loses, that puts a monkey wrench in everything, because then maybe SMU becomes the 11 seed and Bama gets knocked out. And then the 3 seed would then be, I think, Boise State. The 4 seed would then be Arizona State, and then the 12 seed might be Clemson then. I guess that's how it would happen. If Clemson beats SMU, I think they'd probably be the 12 seed because they're ranked lower than Arizona State right now because they just lost to South Carolina. Are they even ranked? I think they might be ranked like 18th or something. But Clemson's strength of record is not good, so I think they would be the 12 seed. So listen, the arguments are there. People are pissed off at the committee. Really, I don't have a problem. I think it's ranked properly, honestly. I do. I don't really. I mean, you could argue Notre Dame should be lower just because their resume is not good. They don't play in a conference. Yes, they're 11-1. Yes, they've been beating teams. That's going to help the analytics. That's going to help them in terms of where they're ranked. But when you don't have a great win and you lost to a MAC school at home, you can start justifying putting some 2-loss teams in front of Notre Dame. Honestly, you could. That's the one thing I could see. But like this argument with Ohio State only dropping 4 spots and Tennessee being below Ohio State's resume is just way better than Tennessee. And the only argument is, well, the Big Ten's just way overrated. Well, I mean, that's your opinion. That's not the committee's opinion. The committee has both of Ohio State's key wins at number 3 and number 9. So, according to the committee, there's no way that you could say Tennessee is better than Ohio State in terms of the resumes, which is very important because you're talking about 8v9 seed. The 8 seed hosts, the 9 seed goes on the road. And then the argument about Alabama. Look, I understand people are upset Alabama's a 3-loss team. They get the benefit of the doubt all the time. They had a bad loss against Oklahoma. But you look at Miami, it's like, you're really going to go to bat for Miami. I mean, let's look at Miami here. What is their best win? Florida in week 1? They won this game. They beat Virginia Tech at home by 4. They beat California on the road by 1. This is just not, Georgia Tech's actually a decent team. They lost that game. You lose to Syracuse. It's just not, I mean, I guess Miami could make it over Bama. It's fine, but their analytics and their resume is just not even close to Alabama's. It's not even close. And I know people are gonna sit there and say, well, Bama has the terrible loss to Oklahoma. That's true. This is a good win against LSU. This win against Missouri is kind of because Missouri's starting quarterback was injured. Tennessee lost. That's a quality loss. You beat South Carolina. It's a tough loss to Vanderbilt. That's not a good loss. But you beat Georgia. But other than that, I mean, it's not like Alabama has an. I mean, Alabama's resume is better, but you're picking. It is what it is, man. I mean, right now, Bama has a better resume. Yes, they have 3 losses. I know people are pissed off, but it doesn't surprise me that based off of these numbers that Bama gets in. Now, listen, guys, I'll be honest with you. People are going to get really, really pissed off. If SMU loses, they're going to be bumped out for Bama. Bama's going to stay in, okay? And the way I can tell that is because unless somehow, and this is not going to happen, and I'll explain this, but the only way SMU would be able to stay in is if they somehow lost a very, very close game to Clemson and, their strength of record stays because it's a quality loss. But the problem is Clemson is really not that good in terms of analytics. They're 26th in terms of strength of record. So if SMU loses to a team that's ranked 26th in terms of strength of record, they're going to drop. Their strength of record is going to drop down. Now, you could argue that if their strength of record only goes to like 13 or 14 and Bama's at like 9, you could still put SMU in over Bama. I don't know. I mean, it's hard. It's with SMU. I don't even know if they have a ranked win. Honestly, I mean these ACC teams, it's really bad. I mean, Louisville was ranked. I think people were saying Louisville should be ranked again because Louisville crushed Kentucky, didn't they? Yeah, they did. They crushed. The problem is Louisville lost to Stanford. How many losses does Louisville have? See, they're 8-4. They've got well, the Notre Dame loss is good. The Miami loss is decent. So they've got really just one horrible loss, Louisville, Stanford. Man, that killed that conference, that loss to Stanford, because they would be a top 20 team if they would have beaten Stanford, and that would really help Miami's resume. But that just goes to show you, I don't know. Maybe SMU makes it with a loss. I know a lot of people are saying they are, but I don't know. Their strength of record, if they lose, is going to get a lot worse. We'll have to see. But that's just the current situation, guys. That's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.